SITREP World Briefing for August 8, 2026. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed a mutual defense pact in Mecca on Friday, formalizing a collective security arrangement under which an armed attack on any one of the three countries would be treated as an attack on all. The agreement commits the three governments to joint support and is intended to strengthen deterrence at a moment of widening instability across the Middle East. The Mecca signing brings together three large Sunni-majority states with sizable militaries and important regional roles: Saudi Arabia as the Gulf's leading Arab power, Turkey as a NATO member with broad defense industrial ambitions, and Pakistan as a nuclear-armed state with long-standing security ties across the Muslim world. By casting the pact in explicit mutual defense terms, the three governments moved beyond routine diplomatic coordination and signaled that any future strike on one member could trigger a wider strategic response from the others. Russian missile strikes killed at least 3 people, including a child, in the Kyiv region on Saturday, according to Ukrainian authorities, in one of the latest attacks to hit areas near the capital. Air raid alerts were declared in and around Kyiv as the strikes landed. The attack came hours after President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to Serbia in what was described as a landmark visit. For Ukraine, the Kyiv region carries both symbolic and operational importance. Attacks there challenged defenses around the seat of government, forced the diversion of air defense resource sources, and reinforced Zelensky's warning that the country's interceptor supplies are under severe strain. A 14-year-old gunman killed 8 people in Bangkok after opening fire first at his home and then at a school, before shooting himself dead. The dead included 5 teachers, and the attack also killed the boys' grandparents, according to accounts from Thai officials and witnesses. The sequence of shootings spanning a private residence and an educational campus in the capital intensified scrutiny of how a teenager obtained a firearm and carried it into a school. Thailand's prime minister said the government would introduce stricter gun laws after the killings. The episode is likely to renew debate over firearms access, school security, and emergency response procedures in a country that has faced repeated mass casualty shootings. The United States said it intends to provide $1 billion in security assistance to Colombia after the inauguration of President Abe de la Espriella. The announcement came from the U.S. State Department late Friday as de la Espriella assumed office in Bogotá, marking an early and substantial signal that Washington plans to anchor its relationship with the new Colombian government around security cooperation, bilateral alignment, and support for the state's coercive institutions. Colombia has long been one of the United States' most important partners in Latin America on counter-narcotics, internal security, and regional diplomacy, so a $1 billion commitment carries weight well beyond ceremonial Inauguration Day politics and points to a renewed emphasis on hard security ties at the start of de la Espriella's term. The pledge also reflects Colombia's enduring strategic importance in the hemisphere. For decades, U.S. policy toward Bogotá has centered on strengthening state capacity against guerrilla groups, drug trafficking networks, and cross-border criminal activity. And a fresh $1 billion infusion suggests the Trump administration sees de la Espriella as a partner willing to pursue that agenda. With the new president only just sworn in, the timing indicates that security will be a defining pillar of the bilateral relationship from the outset. A U.S. federal appeals court ordered the Trump administration to halt construction of its $400 million White House ballroom project. The ruling stopped work on the project after construction had been tied to the site of the demolished East Wing. Trump responded by vowing to appeal the court's intervention. The decision is politically significant because the White House is not only the residence and workplace of the U.S. president, but also a protected national symbol whose physical changes can trigger intense legal and public scrutiny. By freezing a $400 million project on the grounds of the presidential complex, the appeals court inserted the judiciary directly into a clash over executive power, historical stewardship, and the limits of a president's ability to reshape federal property while in office. Trump's promise to appeal means the dispute is likely to continue through the courts. Because the ruling specifically halted construction, the administration now faces an immediate practical consequence. Work cannot proceed unless a higher court reverses the order. Spain and Italy moved on August 8 to impose reciprocal border checks after a sharp dispute over migration from Ceuta, Spain, opened a public rift between two European Union member states. The clash followed the recent arrival of about 50,000 migrants in Ceuta, the Spanish enclave on North Africa's Mediterranean coast, and escalated after Rome introduced checks on travelers from Spain, prompting Madrid to answer with its own controls on arrivals from Italy. The measures amount to a response inside the EU's normally passport-free Schengen area, where internal border restrictions are permitted only under limited circumstances and usually signal a breakdown in trust over migration management. The row has become a broader test for EU coordination because the Ceuta influx has revived arguments over who should absorb new arrivals and how frontline states should be supported. Ireland, which holds the rotating EU presidency, has been drawn into efforts to calm the confrontation and prevent the dispute from widening into a deeper institutional fight over migration policy. Ceuta has long occupied a sensitive place in European border politics because, although it is part of Spain and therefore of the EU, it sits on the African continent and often becomes a flashpoint whenever large movements of people expose the gap between national border control, asylum obligations, and burden sharing among member states. The significance of the standoff reaches beyond travel formalities because reciprocal controls between Spain and Italy show how quickly migration pressure at one external border can disrupt movement across the bloc. For governments in Madrid, Rome, and Dublin, the immediate issue is no longer only the management of arrivals in Ceuta, but whether the EU can preserve free movement while responding to sudden migration surges without unilateral retaliation. This makes the Ceuta crisis a challenge for Ireland's presidency and a reminder that disputes over migration regularly test both the Schengen system and the EU's claims of internal solidarity. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.